Hello, everyone. Welcome to our third workshop today, Creating Generative AI Lessons for Your Discipline. As you hop on in, please open up the chat. It should be open to all. Introduce yourself, your name, your institution, your role, if you're an educator, a faculty member, administrator, whatever you do, instructional designer, maybe you're a student, maybe you're a PackBack employee, say hey. And then, of course, we have to have some sort of icebreaker in here. And so you're going to choose one adjective to describe how you feel about teaching your students about AI. So I'm going to go ahead and let more folks start funneling in and introducing themselves while I see if I can find some familiar names. Hello, Stephen Crawford. So nice to see you again. Stephen has been a panelist on many of these webinars, so it's nice to see a familiar face. Hey, Reed. Reed's from PackBack. Reed will definitely engage in the chat if you need a friendly, I was going to say friendly face, but you can't see Reed's face. So maybe a friendly chat is what is there. Well, come on in. I'm going to go ahead and get started, but keep introducing yourselves, sharing one adjective to describe how you feel about teaching your students about artificial intelligence. And I'm very happy and pleased to see excited used. Old is my adjective. You know what? We're gonna really like remove the walls of intimidation around AI today is my hope, and that everyone feels really empowered to teach their students about AI, because you don't have to be a mad scientist to talk about AI. So let's go over some housekeeping rules. First and foremost, I promise this webinar recording, the link to the deck that I'm going to be using today, and the link to every resource we talk about, because there is a really big guide we've created for you. It's all going to be shared within about 2 days. We try to get it out same day, but just in case there are any sort of technical hiccups, give us 2 days. And then you could also find all of this and past workshops at packback.co/webinars. Ask all of your questions in the Q&A feature, and then we're going to have you put in reflections and chat with peers in the chat. So the chat and the Q&A feature are open. With the Q&A feature, you can actually upvote questions and reply to other people's questions as well. And then panelists, we're going to try our best to monitor the Q&A and the chat as we go and answer stuff in real time. If we get a good question that we feel like is worthy of a synchronous discussion, we'll go ahead and talk about it during the session. So without further ado, I am joined by wonderful people who I'm so blessed to have as colleagues and peers, and that is Ryan, Cynthia. So if you don't know me, my name is Kelsey Beringer. I'm the CEO over at PackBack. I'm a former high school chemistry and physics teacher. I was teaching in the classroom before joining PackBack and have been here ever since. Rye.
Hi, yeah. My name is Rye. I'm a curriculum consultant at PackBack, former middle school English teacher turned curiosity curator, and yeah, living the dream, really. Happy to be here. Cynthia.
Hi, thanks, Rye. I'm Cynthia Wilson. I'm Vice President for Learning and Chief Impact Officer at the League for Innovation. And I have a similar story, except mine's longer. As we were talking earlier, I have a longer journey than these other two people on the panel here. But I was a high school teacher when I started my career, and then I began teaching at a community college. And from there, I ended up at the League, and I've been at the League for 24 years. So it's been a great ride, and I'm very excited about what's happening here today. So thank you.
Thank you so much. If you can't tell, all of the panelists that we'll have in these workshops that we have today, very passionate and motivated at discussing and working around the intersection of technology, innovation, pedagogy, thoughtful ways to weave all of these things together in your classroom. First and foremost, what we care about is our students. And so that's going to be a big theme today, is making sure we're always thinking through, how am I empowering my student? Now, our agenda today, we'll have an introduction from Cynthia. We're going to go ahead and just do a little pulse check to make sure we all understand generative AI. I don't want to assume anyone here is an expert. We're going to talk about a case study of how you can actually teach your students about AI without being an AI expert, and kind of norm around that concept. And then what we're going to do is introduce you to a 4-lesson AI curriculum created by PackBack. Most of the time today is actually going to be a workshop where you do one activity per lesson, and we'll talk a little bit more about the intention there, and then we'll wrap up with a conclusion and a Q&A. So without further ado, Cynthia.
And thanks, Kelsey. And as I said, I'm really excited to be here, and I want to thank all of you for coming. I want to give you a big welcome to this Artificial Intelligence session number 3, how to create generative AI lessons for your discipline. As I said, I'm Cynthia Wilson, and I'm work here at the League. We've been putting these workshops on with PackBack. It's been a great partnership, and we certainly hope that you're getting as much out of it as we're having a great time doing it. And I'm just real excited to introduce this session, which will guide you through some practical examples of how you can, or any educator can, in any discipline, teach their students about AI. And we think about that, we're living in a world where generative AI already touches the lives of over half of our students, arming them with ethical and informed AI knowledge is really an imperative for educators. So we find ourselves at this pivotal moment where inaction and stagnation can have detrimental effects on our students, their career readiness, and their ability to persist in the rapidly changing world. So this workshop is more than just a single event. It's an opportunity to reimagine the boundaries of your curriculum. And I hope you take that opportunity to kind of rethink what you do and how you do it. The combination of expertise in education and cutting-edge AI insights that are in this space right now is creating a frontier in teaching and learning. And it's one that's empowering us to guide students, not merely as recipients of knowledge, but as the curious navigators of the AI landscape that we all need to be. So this workshop is a testament to your commitment to educational innovation. And by exploring that intersection of education and AI, we're setting a new precedent in preparing our students for a future that demands an understanding of responsible use of AI. And I'm honored and excited to accompany you on this journey of exploration and learning. So thank you again for being here. And thank you especially for your dedication to nurturing informed and responsible AI users who will shape our future. Thanks.
Thank you so much. And as Cynthia mentioned, we've been doing these workshops and additional webinars for months now, really. This is the third in a series of workshops related to generative AI applications. The first was creating a ChatGPT-proof assessment. The second was creating a policy for your course. Those are all accessible on the packback.co website, just packback.co/webinars. We also do these podcast style webinars where we talk about news, stories in the news related to the intersection of AI and education, and then have panelists, college professors, college administrators come on and talk about what these news stories mean to them. So the webinars are a little bit more sit back and enjoy and learn, and then the workshops are, we're going to go ahead and get your feet wet. Now, the workshop goals for today, we want to make sure that every instructor, regardless of discipline, or if you're K-12, higher ed, community college, 4-year, we want to make sure you have a 4-course curriculum you can use in your class. More specifically, want to make sure it's around AI and generative AI. AI has been around for a while. Generative AI is new, and it is what has us all on our toes. Now, we also want to create dedicated time and space for faculty to engage with each other. I love keeping the chat open because what I always see happen is folks learn from each other. And we want to share stories and case studies that can help contextualize why things like teaching our students about AI is so important and how it really doesn't have to be intimidating or scary. Let's learn, let's share, let's collaborate. Now, I don't want to assume anybody in this webinar today is an AI expert, specifically a generative AI expert. So I'm going to launch a poll quickly, if I can find my poll tool. There we go. Just let's get a baseline established of how comfortable the audience is with generative AI. You should see a poll right now. Go ahead and open that. So how comfortable and knowledgeable are you with generative AI like ChatGPT? And then have you already taught your students about generative AI, ChatGPT? I want to get an idea of the breakdown of the room. Again, intention here is This lesson is going to be kind of open to all audiences for sure. I just want to make sure I don't skip over something or under-explain something throughout this webinar. Awesome. I'll wait for a few more responses until I close out the poll. We have a true mixed bag here, which is very exciting. When I'm definitely going to rely on the chat for folks to start engaging in conversation and learn from each other. So I'm going to go ahead and share results. Looks like we're pretty evenly split between our comfort and our knowledge. We have a few who are very comfortable and knowledgeable and a few who are not comfortable or knowledgeable at all. And then 30-60 split for have we already taught our students about generative AI. So understanding generative AI is artificial intelligence. What it does that's a little bit different than other AI is it generates content, text, images, audio, video using generative models. So it's actually it's trained, but it's creating new information based off of what it's trained to do. So not all AI is generative AI, but generative AI is just a branch of artificial intelligence itself. Now, why it's so popular and what happened is we had ChatGPT go viral, what you're seeing here. And what started happening is everybody started using it. Marketers were using it to write copy for their social media posts and their emails. Students were using it to write. I personally use generative AI often, but generative AI has changed the game because AI has always been cool and it's always been integrated in our lives, but it's felt a little almost undetectable in some ways. Generative AI is like a big punch in the face. It feels magical. It feels extraordinary. It almost feels like it's science fiction brought to life. So what we're going to be talking about today is generative AI in depth and how we teach our students around generative AI. Before we hop into our workshop, I want to talk about why we need to teach students about AI. If you've been to a workshop or a webinar before, you've probably seen this quote. Why we need to be teaching our students about AI is because AI is everywhere around them. They're using it, whether or not they're being trained how to use it. It's impacting their everyday lives. They're reading news stories. The future working generation of America is reading news stories about job automation due to AI. We need to give them the skills for career readiness, which is teaching them about AI. We also need to have open and honest conversations about them so that they don't feel fear and anxiety around AI in the same way that probably a lot of educators are feeling fear and anxiety. We need to teach our students about generative AI because it's our duty as educators to teach them about things that are going to affect their lives. Now, there are ways in which your students can use generative AI that is not cheating. And I just want to show one example. And this is probably a little bit more applicable to, let's say, a high school student or an early college student with maybe some executive functioning issues, but how they can go ahead and create a study schedule based off of what they need to study, the timeline to study it, and how much free time they have. Here's an example of how a student could use GPT as what I'd call a personal assistant, or for real, like a tutor or a advisor, right? So there are ways for students to use generative AI that is not cheating, and we're going to talk about a lot of those today. Now, you're probably asking yourself, okay, if I'm not an AI expert, how do I actually teach my students about AI? My background is I am an educator, and I did teach chemistry and physics. I have a chemistry degree. While I am a woman in STEM, I know nothing about how to build AI. I don't know how to code. If you ask me how AI works, I can give you a very confident explanation. But if you ask me to go build AI, I would look at you completely confused and unable to move. It is not our job to be able to build AI or speak to how AI works perfectly, but we should be able to speak to the implications of AI. We should be teaching our students how to use AI in a way that's appropriate in our classroom setting. So I'm going to show an example of what teaching your students about generative AI could look like, even if you're not an AI expert, or even if you're on that scale of, I don't feel confident at all. So here's an example. This is a discussion prompt from PackBack, which is a discussion community. How are you feeling about generative AI like ChatGPT? You can literally just have a weekly discussion assignment 1 week, say, hey, I have a lot of feelings about ChatGPT. What are your feelings? And just put the onus on the student to share what they think they should be learning when it comes to generative AI, what they want to do with generative AI, what they don't want to do with generative AI. Open up a discussion. That requires no expertise from your end. All it requires from you is the opportunity to have a discussion with your students. One of PackBack's most amazing educator users, Heather Olson, who's been on some of these panels with us, did this back in February of 2023. So this was still in kind of the infancy stage and the very like, I'm scared of everything stage with ChatGPT and education. And she asked her students to talk about generative AI and ChatGPT in her PackBack community, and the results were really amazing. What Heather found was that a lot of her students were talking about potential equity concerns, and they were talking about how they're here to learn. They're not here to cheat their assignments, and they want to make sure that they're in a academically honest setting. So it was really surprising to actually just open up that discussion and see how aligned most students were with the thoughts, feelings, anxieties, hopes that most educators have. I think there's this misconception that teachers are the most nervous and the most anxious about AI and education right now. And I'd argue that students are really on that boat as well. So that's hopefully just some context setting and around why it's so important for us to teach our students around AI, and that it really doesn't need to be overly complex, intimidating, and we don't need to get into the weeds. And before I pass it over to Rai to take us into our next session, I'm gonna lay this not a precursor, not a warning, I don't know the word to say in this moment, but this workshop is meant to teach, or I should say, is meant to show you and give you a resource to teaching your students about AI. If you're coming here today not intending to teach your students about AI, that is totally fine. That's what this workshop goal is. Now, if you're still on the fence, or if you're really against teaching your students about AI, I actually implore you to keep a very open mind and hang out during this entire workshop, because maybe you're going to find that, oh, I don't want to teach my students about how to use AI in my course, but I do want to have that conversation with them. So it might be just one small thing we put in front of you today you actually intend on using for the future. So Rai, I'll go ahead and be your clicking guide throughout this, but go ahead, take it away.
Fantastic. Well, we're going to start by taking a couple of minutes to reflect before we kind of get into the lessons here. So take a few minutes to write out your answers to these two questions. How do you want your students utilizing AI in your course? What do you want to teach your students about, what do you want to teach your students about in relation to AI? Think about those answers, write those answers out. If you're feeling comfortable, please put them in the chat. I'm seeing a lot of really great answers come up, a lot around organization, using it for as a supportive tool in their learning, not as a replacement tool in their learning, right? Really important. Kelsey already put a preview of the poll in there, but next step is I'm going to ask you a couple of poll questions. What lessons are you planning to teach your students? So we've got 4 lessons that we've created for you. I want to know which lessons you're thinking you could apply in your course. Awesome. Very cool. Awesome. Well, let's get into it. What are you thinking? Okay, cool. Lots of great responses. I'm glad that everyone's here to learn about these lessons. I'm really excited to show you. So let's get into it. This is really the meat and potatoes of our webinar today. We're going to talk about the 4-lesson curriculum that PackBack has put together, lessons that you could take and run with in your class this fall, next spring, whenever you're teaching. Awesome. So let's first by starting how to use the curriculum guide. We've built a 4-lesson AI curriculum guide that anyone can use, any discipline, meant to be like super interdisciplinary here. Lessons are super customizable. They can be, of course, expanded on, consolidated. They're not really in any particular order. You could skip lessons, although I would say one of them is an introduction to AI lesson. You may want to start there, but other than that, you can skip lessons, use one, some, or all of them. Some of the lessons we'll show you today require a high level of customization before you implement them. So we're going to be talking about a lesson about how AI impacts your discipline. That particular lesson requires a high level of customization, but some lessons are really ready to go for you to use. Each lesson will include an educator guide slide and student-facing slides. So in the guide that you get today, later on, when you see a PackBack logo, those are instructor-facing slides not meant for student eyes. This is the table of contents from that guide. As you can see here, we've got 4 lessons. All of them come with activities, and then we've included an appendix of additional resources. Really want to note here that PackBack's team of educators put these slides and put these lessons together, myself included, but you should feel all the agency to use what works for you, change what needs to be changed to fit your discipline. The guide is very large. It's 100 and what, Kelsey, I think it's like 113 slides. It's a large deck. It contains teaching slides, activities, the appendix. We're not going to give the link just yet. We are first going to walk through kind of an outline of those lessons and provide some opportunity for experimentation and practice for you. Really, the intention here is to put yourself in your students' shoes before you take this lesson guide and run with it in your class. So we will, once we complete the 4 workshop activities, you will get the link to the curriculum guide. Awesome. For each of the lessons, we will show you the lesson objectives. So we have 4 lessons. We'll show you the lesson objectives for all of those lessons, provide an example of the teaching slides, and then we'll have a 5-minute activity for you to practice. These are not necessarily the activities that your students will do. It's really meant to orient you and kind of give you some practice into what we'll be doing here.
Thank you so much. And there's a great question, which is, do you have to be a PackBack customer to use these? Absolutely not. These webinars are meant for anybody who teaches a course, right? And you will get these slides. You're going to get the big guide as well. And the big guide will be accessible on our website. And so feel free to share those. We put that in the guide too, that you can feel free to use this. Just make sure to cite your source, AKA myself, Rye, and then implementing some generative AI along the way. So let's go ahead and hop into the first lesson, which is Introduction to AI. So this is from the curriculum guide, and these are the objectives of the lesson. So first and foremost, we want to define artificial intelligence and then common language that we're going to hear, like narrow versus general, artificial intelligence, or of course, we're going to define that, machine learning, large language models, kind of like AI 101. There are a lot of videos in it so that you don't have to over-explain. You can rely on professionals. Provide everyday examples or provide examples of AI in our everyday life, and then discuss the benefits versus risks of AI. Now, we're going to show you an example from the lesson. So this is an example from the lesson. What this is an example of AI in our everyday lives. In Facebook and most social media, they use facial recognition software that is powered by artificial intelligence, specifically machine learning artificial intelligence, to identify patterns in facial recognition. So here's an example from Facebook. If one of your friends uploads a picture, Facebook thinks you're in that picture via facial recognition. it will actually notify you and say, hey, is this you? Do you want to tag yourself? This is something that almost every social media has, if not all. Your students are probably using daily, if not minutely. And it's a great example to show them how intertwined AI is in our everyday life and how fundamental it is in our day-to-day lives. So this is from the curriculum guide. Now we're going to do a quick activity here. This is not actually an activity in the curriculum guide. It's an activity to build some context around the value proposition of this lesson, what this lesson is really trying to get students to understand. So we're going to have about 3 to 5 minutes. I'm going to actually have Rye do this on their own to tell me how long it takes them. But take 3 to 5 minutes right now. You're going to go find a unique example right now of how AI is impacting your everyday life. You have to find a use case that you did not know about until your research right now. So you have to find a new implementation of AI in your everyday workflow that you didn't know about until your research right this moment. And then extra points. We're playing a fake game, so you get extra points. The example you find somehow impacts your discipline. So if you're a chemistry professor, it impacts chemistry, or a common career that most of your students are hopping into. So if you're in the social work field, let's think about how it's impacting social work. So I'm going to go ahead and set the timer. And I'm going to mute myself and turn my camera off, and everybody go find an example. When you're done, I would love for everyone to share them in the chat, especially if you found a news article, to just share that link. All right, I'm going to come back a little bit early, and I just opened up some examples here. AI has a discrimination problem in banking. The consequences can be severe. So again, you're probably thinking, what can I possibly talk to my students about if I'm teaching, finance or whatever it might be? Like we're talking about crunching numbers all day. How can I possibly talk about AI? How AI, let me get out of these pop-ups, how AI is helping historians better understand our past. Thousands of authors urge AI companies to stop using work without permission. There are some folks who are saying there's really nothing new that I'm on top of the news constantly. What I do often is just go into Google and I Google something like artificial intelligence plus chemistry or biochemistry or whatever it would be, and then I just go straight to the news tab. And that's honestly, I subscribe to a lot of work newsletters and podcasts and things like that, but that's oftentimes how I'm getting my news, and that could be a great place or a great way for you to source applicable, timely news stories that relate to your students. So thank you so much. I hope everyone learned one new thing about AI as it relates to their discipline right now. We're going to go ahead and exit out of some of these. And I'm going to go ahead and pass it to Rye to talk about lesson 2, which is how to use generative AI as a collaborator.
Yeah, so lesson 2 is, like Kelsey just said, how to use it as a collaborator. A lot of you, when you talked about how you want students to use AI, we're talking about having them use it as a tutor or having them use it as like, how to create like a good study flow for them. So this lesson is really all about that. The objectives for this lesson: to identify platforms available for written, visual, and audio AI. For collaboration, review recommendations for writing high quality prompts for generative AI, discuss specific use cases for AI utilization and how to appropriately use them academically, and then share examples of ways we can use AI for personal collaboration. This is one of our slides from the curriculum, 5 rules for creating great prompts. One of the things that I talk with instructors about a lot when it comes to like how AI is going to be used by students in their classroom is like, students are going to go to ChatGPT or something like that and put in a prompt. But that prompt might not be a good prompt to get a good answer. We want to teach students how to critically think and create a good prompt so they can get a good quality answer, right? So this is from that slide. Shameless plug, we talk about this more in depth in our first webinar, how to ChatGPT proof your assignments. All right, jumping right along into lesson 2 activity. Again, this is for you. This is not exactly the activity that students will do, but they will do something similar. Take a couple of minutes to reflect on the most common questions that you get from students about your content. So I think, Kelsey, we were talking about this earlier. One of the questions you got all the time as a physics teacher was like, how can velocity be negative, right? So think about your content. What questions come up often from students? And then I want you to go to a chatbot of your choice, like ChatGPT, and ask those questions. See what kind of responses the generative AI will be giving your students. Take a few minutes to do this activity. as you start to get answers from the chatbot, in the chat, share a little bit about like, how did it do acting as a content tutor? Was it good? Was it insightful? Did it not provide the right answer? Let me know. I'm going to take a poll for you. Feel free to rate on a scale of 1 to 5. How good it is.
Oh, Rye, by the way, I just had a hard time hearing you.
Fair enough.
You've been fine the whole time up until now. All right, for those still setting up GPT accounts or Claude accounts, by the way, this is going to be the last time we use GPT. We're going to be using other tools or no tools moving forward. So if you're stuck, A-okay. So if you haven't yet taken the poll, go ahead and take the poll of rate the output from GPT or other generative AI on a scale of 1 to 5. That should not say 2, that should say 5. That is my bad right there. 5 is very helpful. Yes, good. And 1 is very bad, no good. Numbers have lost their meaning currently. I personally, when I asked it about to explain how can I be moving fast with the negative acceleration, it gave a quite good response that I think would be really easy for a student to understand. It also just gave them a real world example. But the concept of velocity and acceleration is very well written about and very straightforward. So I think it's going to be a little bit hard to get a bad response from GPT about velocity and acceleration. So if you haven't yet taken the poll, go ahead and take the poll. Seems a little all over the board here, share results. And again, maybe you were misled by the fact that there was an error in the numbering system. That is my bad. But hopefully this was insightful. If you haven't done this yet, and you want to keep doing it, I highly recommend, one of the best things any instructor could do is, if you do have writing assignments, is go put your writing prompt into ChatGPT and see what comes out of it. It's a great indicator for you if you need to maybe edit your assignment prompt. So let's talk about lesson number 3, which is AI ethics. So the objective for this lesson is pretty intense. This is definitely a full lesson from start to finish. So how to appropriately utilize artificial intelligence without sacrificing academic integrity. This is also a lesson where I highly recommend you share a lot of personal perspective and you're just vulnerable with your students. Discuss why it's important to be academically honest. It's not about the fact that, you know, we have this we don't want them using generative AI. It's that we want them to learn, right? And it's, if you are cheating, you're not learning. And that's the piece there. How to cite use of generative AI, define key ethical principles, and then recognize potential risks by actually talking about real stories. So here's an example of content from the curriculum guide. In the curriculum guide, we've put together training for MLA, APA, and Chicago style, specifically what they've said to do with citing generative AI. So if you want to give this lesson and you use APA, you just delete the information about MLA and Chicago and just show the APA slides. So this is an example of what we put together for students. It's showing them how they could be citing generative AI if they are in a course that requires MLA formatting and citations. It also, by the way, has many other slides on a lot of different things. But let's go ahead and do our next activity. What writing style do you use in your course? Do you use APA? Do you use MLA? Do you use Chicago style? If you don't actually have a style, just pick a random one, pick APA. Spend 3 to 5 minutes finding your style's formal how to cite generative AI guide. And again, this isn't about using generative AI to create citations. This is about how do we cite generative AI as a source. So if your students are using generative AI, how should they cite it? Every style guide has a recommendation at this point. So you're going to spend the next 3 to 5 minutes finding your style's formal recommendation for how to cite generative AI. I'd recommend you just Google your citation style plus. Oh, there's a good question. Go ahead, start working on this. I'm going to go ahead and play the timer here. I also ask that you review the guide until you have a thorough understanding of how this guide recommends students and others cite generative AI. But there was a really good question that just came up that said, please elaborate on made-up articles. If you do go to a GPT or a Claude and you ask it to generate sources, sometimes it'll actually generate real sources, but sometimes it does this thing called hallucinating, and it will just make up sources because it's been fed enough reference information that it knows what a source should look like, and it'll just make up a title that's somewhat relevant. So I've definitely seen GPT make up sources. So right now, go ahead for this activity, research your style guide and see what their formal recommendation is on citing generative AI. We'll come back together in 2 to 3 minutes. Just coming back on here. Yeah, it's interesting. MLA, APA, Chicago all have different recommendations for how we should be citing AI. Chicago is, I would say, the most confusing guide to follow. It's very vague, and I think they've done that on purpose because they don't want to make any strong recommendations so soon. Yep. So I'm going to go ahead and launch a poll for us here. I want to get an idea of what writing style guide do you use? So do you use APA? Do you use MLA, Chicago, other, none? By the way, the reason why we do APA, MLA, Chicago as kind of our basics is they're the most commonly used from what we've experienced for writing. I know there are a lot of different style guides with within STEM and within different disciplines. So want to be mindful of that. So have an option for other or none. And then did your style have guidelines on how to cite generative AI? Did you find them? We know for sure APA, MLA, and Chicago does. I think another question I have that I'd be interested to hear in the chat is, if you assign writing, but you don't necessarily assign a specific style, like you have writing assignments, but your students don't have to write an MLA, APA, how would you recommend they cite generative AI if they do use generative AI? Let's say to get feedback on their writing, or to get kind of like ideas to get out of writer's block. If you don't have a style, how would you recommend your students cite generative AI? I think that's an interesting discussion. Would you just give them a random style just so that they had some guidance? I'll keep waiting for some poll results to come in. I've got about 112 right now. Some good stuff is coming up in the chat here. So the first one is ChatGPT is based off of data up through 2021 at some point. So if you ask it for information that didn't exist during that time or before that time, it's going to draw a blank. So if you ask it for an MLA citation guide for ChatGPT, it's going to say, I don't know that, because ChatGPT didn't exist, and that guide didn't exist when the data was created that it was trained on. Oh, okay, if that's only for GPT-3, 4 is more up to date. That makes sense. Okay. All right, this is very, very helpful to see. I'm going to go ahead and share the results of the poll. Again, this lesson that we're going to give you, lesson number 3, it will have all 3 citation guides that we talked about, MLA, APA, Chicago. So you'll just delete the ones you don't need, add one you might need. But it's super important, if you also have some sort of expectation for your student to cite use of generative AI, to add that. For example, I would ask my student to always use GPT because they can share a link to the chat feed and the chat history. So I would personally ask that as an educator, but it does mean you're forcing one technology on your students, and you have to make sure that's approved within your department and at your university. All right, Rye, I'll go ahead and mute myself and pass it to you.
Awesome. And if my audio is messed up, but lesson.
Dude, it's definitely bad.
Sorry.
All right, I can take this one. I'm sorry, Rye. Oh, this is making me sad. All right, just share a lot in the chat. All right, so went ahead to ask poll number 4. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. So let's talk about generative AI and its impact in your discipline. This is going to be our last activity before we give you the guide. Actually, Rye, if you'll go ahead and pull the guide up and just have the link ready to share in the chat. So this is the only lesson that must be customized, period. All the other lessons, you don't really have to customize. You might just have to delete some extra slides, but this is all about examining current and emerging applications of AI in the discipline you teach, discussing ethical implications. Let's say you're in medicine. There are a lot of ethical implications of AI being trained on data that exists in medicine, because there are biases that exist from years of discrimination that if we train our AI on, we might see that projected outward and extrapolated. And then reflect on personal assumptions about AI impact on the nature of work. So this is an example from the curriculum guide. The curriculum guide has a lot of assessment ideas. And so this is an assessment idea for this lesson, which is a writing prompt. It could be an essay, it could be a discussion, it could be just like a short form writing on the intersection of AI and your discipline. So here's an example of an assignment that is in the guide that we'll give you. And of course, you can take this and run with it. You can modify it. You can strip it down, add more to it, totally up to you. But we'll wrap with this activity. I want everyone to go to perplexity.ai. It should not need an account. Perplexity.ai is a generative AI tool that is connected to the internet. So what is generative AI? What it's going to do is summarize search results for me and cite its sources. Perplexity.ai is one of my favorite tools. I use it constantly. I actually have started using Claude and Perplexity.ai way more than ChatGPT. So what you're going to do is go to Perplexity.ai, and you are going to ask the chatbot, how will generative AI and greater advancements in AI affect insert your discipline? Now, if you are a writing teacher, you can say writing, but let's say that you want to just think a little bit more about maybe career. So let's say copywriting or content creation and marketing, something like that. So go ahead, ask the chatbot, keep refining your prompt and asking new questions until you find at least 2 to 3 news stories and or articles that are of interest and relevant to you. Because we're running just in our last 9 minutes of this webinar, I'm going to give everyone 3 minutes for this activity. And I'm also interested to hear your thoughts on Perplexity.ai. Yes, just got a question. It is connected to the internet. So what it'll do is it'll answer your question much like a chatbot would, but it'll also be pulling in articles from the internet and then citing them. So the way that I can show this is, all right, generative AI is a type of artificial intelligence that is capable of generating new content, and then 1 in 3. And so it's pulling from Wikipedia and it's pulling from this article from TechTarget. So this is a great way for you to not only get a summary of information, but then also go learn more from a specific source. So I need a current news story to share on a webinar about AI and teaching. Help. Let's see how good this is. I don't know. I've never done this one before. All right, let's just go to this first and let's see how relevant it is. July 13th, 2023. All right, I'd say not bad. I'm not sure if you can share the output. I know that you can copy it. You can view sources. You can copy and edit the query. I don't think you could share yet. I know there is a, oh, wait, maybe. Perhaps. I'm going to go ahead and test it. All right. Yeah, I just learned today. We're happy. All right. For the sake of time, what I'm going to do here is launch our final poll. And then I'm immediately going to open up the guide and we're going to start looking at it. So last poll of the day, if you wouldn't mind taking it, which is just after this workshop. I know you haven't seen the guide yet. You haven't seen the curriculum. So it depends on the quality of the curriculum we're about to share with you. But after this workshop, how are you feeling about incorporating 1 or more of these lessons into your courses this fall? And then I will go ahead and open up the curriculum. And like I said, it is very large. It takes a while to navigate. And Ryan and I were talking about it. We've gone over this with a wide tooth comb, but not a fine tooth comb. So if you see a spelling error, a grammatical error, anything like that, please just edit it. Once we're not in the middle of the insanity that is registration season for higher education and K-12 at PackBack, we're going to do a deeper dive into this and also beef up some of the assessments as well. So I'm going to go ahead and share out the link right now. And then I will have Rye continue to also share out links. because I'm sure it's going to get buried in the chat. So Rye, if you can keep an eye on it, go ahead and open up this deck. We're going to go ahead and wrap up. I'm curious, I should have made a poll question of how many folks here have been to multiple of these workshops now. We've done, this is now our third. Our first was creating ChatGPT proof assessments and actually using ChatGPT to create assessment prompts. Our second was creating a policy. Okay, third, yay, okay. We spent a lot of time together. I'm intrigued to hear, what have you learned and what would you still like to learn? So you should have the link to this deck. If not, we're going to be sending it out within the next, few hours to next day, really. You can get access to the previous ones at packback.co/webinars. I also just put, and you'll get the guide. So these workshops come with like a PDF guide on how to go ahead and create content. I just shared the deck one more time. And then I'd just love to hear before you log off and we say goodbye to each other today as we wrap up on time. What have you learned and what would you still like to learn? And we'll keep sending the link in there. I'm going to answer some questions while folks wrap up. Packback does have detection in its questions and its deep dives platform. So both for essays and discussions, there's likelihood of AI. So AI detection will just kind of tell you what's the likelihood, high, medium, low. There was a great question, which is some more videos, podcasts on the subject. In the curriculum itself, the very last few slides is an appendix that has some great AI resources to learn about AI. So definitely use that as well. Awesome. And if you do want access to the chat, it's not something we usually share, but feel free to reach out to curious@packback.co and we'll send you an anonymous version of the chat. We can do that. Great question. Is there a cost for using AI? Right now, there are a lot of free tools. I'd imagine just because it's becoming so commoditized that it's going to be hard to actually for these creators to ask for monetization. So let's just hope stuff stays free. Yeah, Rye.
It happens. Sorry, everybody. Really happy to be here, though.
Well, thank you so much for coming. If I wish we had more time for a Q&A, but this is a pretty long session. We'll do a webinar in about a month from now. So feel free to join that. It's kind of a mix of a little bit of everything. If you are curious about learning more about Packback, we didn't talk about Packback at all today. It is an AI writing and discussion platform. We use AI to teach students how to write confidently and with strong voice. Go ahead and email curious@packback.co. If you do work at one of Rye's institutions, Rye, you work with, who do you work with these days?
Oh, tons of folks. Miami-Dade College, Ivy Tech Community College, Tulsa Community College. Yeah, I mean, to name a few.
All right.
Lots of folks.
Yes. Go to one of Rye's sessions that they're always running. So I like to think Packback rocks, Rye rocks. And thanks so much for joining this workshop today, being so engaged, joining us through technical difficulties and just a little bit of fun. If you didn't get the slide deck, I'll share it out one more time. And then from there, you will be emailed the slide deck from our marketing manager. Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.